So I just hit 2,000 subs, and thank you so much for that. It means the world to me. And to celebrate, I want to do something arbitrary and kind of stupid. I'm going to review every book I have read from the year 2000. Now, the year 2000 had some serious bangers. And as I was looking back on these, I was trying to think about what I was reading in the year 2000. I turned 13 that year. And at the time, I was reading the Sword of Truth series, which we've discussed in another video. I was reading Jurassic Park and the Lost World. I read Shogun. That is not a book for a 13-year-old. I think I still have my original copy, but maybe not. It was being held together with duct tape. It was a mass market paperback I picked up for $1. There was this used bookstore right by my house, and it was wonderful. I would spend hours in there, and I'd buy a couple books for $1 or $2 each. And knowing what I know now, I appreciate it even more. It really bums me out that it's not still there. I don't even know if it lasted a year, but it was super cool. I used to walk down there. But anyways, let's talk about what came out in the year 2000. I'm not going to review these in any order of like worst to best, because I don't want to sort them that way. And it's kind of fun just to see what pops up as we're going through it. All right, first thing is first. Terry Goodkind's Faith of the Fallen. I really enjoyed the beginning of it, and then it very quickly becomes, how Ayn Rand can I be without saying Ayn Rand or objectivism in this book? So it gets ridiculous. He uses the power of capitalism to fight against the bureaucratic autocracy or whatever crap he's dealing with. He ends up kind of getting kidnapped and taken to the old world and forced to see how people really live. Your world can't exist without other people suffering, and you need to see what the world's really like. And then he gets to the place and it's just a autocratic shithole. So I don't know what she was trying to teach him. And of course, he creates a statue that's in his book cover art that breaks the minds of everyone and causes a revolution because the art is so beautiful. And it's like, all right. So the book is not very good. The ending is very stupid. I'm just going to spoil it. The main character ends up fighting his significant other, but there's like a spell on him, so she can't tell it's him. So he fights her in a way that he was assuming she would recognize, and then he leaves an opening and she runs him through. And he's like, I thought you'd know. And it's like, what a dumbass idea. Like, why would you do that? We don't need to go any further into that story. Faith of the Fallen, probably the worst book on this list. Let's move on. Oh my God, we have a banger. Probably the best book published in the year 2000. Stephen Erickson's Dead House Gates. This is one of my favorite Malazan books of all time. I mean, what is there to say about it? It has everything I love in fantasy in a single book, and it's written by one of the best fantasy writers of all time. I know a lot of people get frustrated with it because you're jumping from Gardens of the Moon to completely new cast of characters-ish, but the 7 cities are just so good. It's such a wonderful setting, and the Chain of Dogs is an encapsulation of everything that I think Erickson was going for in this series. I love this from start to finish. I enjoyed Gardens of the Moon, but by the time I was done with Dead House Gates, I knew I was locked in for the rest of the series, which is why I binged them back to back in 5 months or something, which is kind of absurd. It's like 14,000 pages. So good. Few fantasy novels come anywhere close to the quality of this book. I love Dead House Gates so much. I cannot tell you enough times how much I love that book. I think about it constantly. I got the jitters when I finally found a physical copy. I was just beyond excited, and it's the one with this beautiful cover. It's a trade paperback. Probably best book on the list. So hey, look, we've already done the worst and the best. So let's see what's next. Shadow of the Hegemon. Not the worst book on the list because that's Faith of the Fallen. I really like this book. Orson Scott Card sucks, but I really like what he was doing with this book. This is a sequel to Ender's Game, and it follows Bean. It's technically a sequel to Ender's Shadow, but that takes place during Ender's Game. It is about the after effects of creating a school and filling them with genius children and then making them some of the best military strategists to ever exist. They go back home, and now you have all of these different nations who are using these kids as military assets to destabilize the world. And Bean sees it coming because he is like the 400 IQ kid. And this book is about Bean teaming up with Peter, Ender's older brother, who is like a monster a lot of the time to Ender. He slowly matures throughout this whole series, but his goal is like world domination, and him and Bean team up to make it happen, to stop these other nations from creating these horrendous wars where some of the greatest military leaders to have ever existed fight one another. It's crazy. And maybe if I read it now, because it's been like 15, 16 years, I wouldn't like it as much, but I remember at the time really enjoying it. I really like Ender's Shadow. I think Bean is a better character than Ender. Anyways, Shadow of the Hegemon. It's a good book that no one's going to read because Orson Scott Card sucks. sucks, and let's move on. By the way, I'm going to put a couple of books at the end that are things I want to read. Here we go. Winter's Heart, everyone's favorite Wheel of Time novel. It's definitely not part of the slog. I have no idea what you're talking about. The slog is a myth. I love this book. I think of the slower Wheel of Time books, it is one of the better ones. There's a lot of squabbling and crap, but it has one of the best endings in the series. When I finished it, I was like, holy crap, I need to know what happens next. And I burned through the book after this, and I didn't get what I wanted because we're talking about the maybe slog in the series, but I really like it. And what I really like is not this original artwork. I love this artwork. It is so cool. It is like a perfect encapsulation of the events that are going to happen in Winter's Heart, and it's some good stuff. I'm a big fan of the Wheel of Time. I don't know if I've talked about it enough, but when I finally do a reread, I'm never going to shut up. I don't know if this comes across in my videos, but I'm a very big nerd, and I love manga and anime, and I wanted nothing more in my life than to just enjoy Naruto when I was in high school. I remember I was downloading bootleg subbed episodes like 2 days after they came out in Japan because the whole little network that would do the subtitles was very good. When I caught up, which only took me like 70 episodes or something, I was like, well, I want to know what's going to happen. And so I ended up getting the manga, which was also translated by fans, and I binged all of it. I mean, that goes deep into Shippuden, and I had such a great time with it, and I didn't even know this came out in the year 2000. Maybe it was in America that it came out in 2000. I'm not sure. Naruto is always going to have a special place in my heart. So when I got older, I thought, I want to read more nonfiction. And for a couple of years, I got like obsessed with cooking. And so, of course, the first thing I read was Kitchen Confidential. I didn't know this came out in 2000 either. I think I read it in like 2009, 2010. It's great. Anthony Bourdain is a wonderful writer. Hey, look, Newsweek says unique and mesmerizing. One of the things I remember most, I don't know if it was from this one or from Medium Raw, was he started talking about pho, and that's all I wanted in my life. I hadn't had pho since I was maybe like 14. My uncle was painting a 1989 Honda Civic hatchback for this family from Laos, and they were going to be putting it into like a custom Japanese import car competition. And my uncle was like really good at painting, and they didn't have to pay him much because he wasn't a professional painter. And they had us eat dinner with him, and that was my first time having pho. And then I didn't have it again for like a few years. You come back to these thoughts later, and you're like, I really need me some soup. And I found a place near me. It's great. I go there all the time. It is what I use to judge whether or not fast food is worth buying. If I can go to a fast food restaurant and get enough to feed my family, I will compare that to what it costs to buy pho from my favorite place. And if it costs more, I ain't eating there ever again. I'll just go get pho. And for people who don't know, that's Vietnamese soup. Here's a picture of it. It's beautiful. And none of this has anything to do with Kitchen Confidential. I think it's a great book. Anthony Bourdain used to rub a lot of people wrong, especially with his anti-vegetarian, anti-vegan stuff. I think he softened as time went on, especially when a chef who really knew what they were about sat him down and fed him vegan food. It's such a cool book talking about the underbelly of the cooking industry, to see what cooks are doing and chefs are doing and kind of how the industry worked. I don't know how it works now, but how it worked at the time was just really fascinating. And his love of food just jumps off the page, and it's so cool to see. It really reinvigorated my love for food and cooking. And so it's one of those things I kind of want to go back and read again. It's been a long time, and it was such a joy to read. And a guy that I used to work with, I mentioned, hey, you should check out audiobooks. They're really cool, because he said he never had time to read. And he got Kitchen Confidential as like his one book from Audible. And he's like, I've listened to it like 8 or 9 times. I haven't got another book yet. And I'm like, what? And he's like, it was really good. So I just canceled my subscription. And every time I'm bored, I just listen to it again. And I'm like, more power to you, man. So yeah, listen to that guy that I can't remember the name of. He knows what he's talking about. Good book. I love me some Harry Dresden. I am late to the party. So I started the series back in like 2022 or something like that, 2021. I listened to like 5 or 6 of them because they should be listened to. I mean, let's be real. The audio quality is like unparalleled. I know people complain about the early books because there was like mouth noise or something. I never noticed any of it. Maybe I'm just not sensitive to it. They're so good. James Marsters is like the best narrator ever. But yeah, I started them. I did like the first 5 or 6, and I'm like, this is really good. And then I stopped, and then I got my wife into them, and she just knocked out all of those super fast. And I was like, hey, you gotta slow down. I'm going to stay one ahead of you, and we're going to read the series together. And we did. It was wonderful. We spent, 5 months reading them. It was such a joy to share a series with my wife. And Stormfront came out in the year 2000. I didn't even know about this book. I was a fantasy nerd, I guess, because I was like 13. I'm not wandering around the bookstore because I'm poor. I don't have a job. I'm 13. So maybe I just never heard of them. And I don't even think I heard about Dresden until like 2010, 2012. But love me some Dresden. I like Stormfront. I think it's a good book. It's not as good as the ones later on, but I still had a great time with it because it convinced me to read 5 more books in the series. I did them back to back. I'm really looking forward to my eventual reread. As soon as the next book has a release date that's set in stone, I will be reading the series again with my wife. It'll be a ton of fun. Looking forward to it. So this next one is the best nonfiction book out of everything from the year 2000 I've read, and that is Stephen King's On Writing, A Memoir of the Craft. This book is amazing. I've read it twice. I read it in paper, and then I did the audiobook that is narrated by Stephen King. So you can have the man himself tell you his story. It's so good. He knows how to deliver every line that's written in the book. His cadence is really good. You feel like he's talking to you. This book was written just for you, and it's wonderful. The book is such a huge inspiration for me. You can see his love of the craft in every page of this book. And if you read this, I highly suggest you then read The Shining right after it, because I mentioned it in my Shining review. That book is a perfect execution of everything he tells you about the craft of writing in this book. Stephen King's On Writing, very good. Highly recommend it. Holy crap, the book's 25 years old. Is there going to be like a 25th anniversary? That'd be really cool. That's something about a lot of these books. Where are my 25th anniversary editions? I need them. How am I just realizing this? Also, yes, the year 2000 was a quarter of a century ago. I am sorry, fellow millennials. House of Leaves. I have never finished this book because it scares the hell out of me. It might not do it now, but when I read it in high school, the book was only a few years old. My girlfriend at the time loaned it to me. I got right to the first really scary part and I was just like, nope. And I gave it back and I was like, yeah, I'm done. I don't even think we talked about it after that, but yeah, this is a very strange book. There's like pages that are all wonky. Things are printed weird. It's a story and a story and a story. There's like a meta narrative. The book's got a lot going on and maybe eventually I will read it again. I have a copy, but I'm not sure because it freaked me out. One of the stories in the story is about a house where the dimensions on the inside don't match like the outside. There's like a door in there, and when you open it, it leads into a room, but that's like an exterior wall. And every time you open the door, it's like different. And the thing that freaked me out was someone went in there and they had like strings so they wouldn't get lost because the rooms don't have lighting and they just go on for what seems like forever. Well, they follow their string back and it leads to a wall. And that freaked me out, especially when I was in high school. I had really bad claustrophobia. So getting trapped inside a room and not knowing the way out was not okay with me. So I dropped that book like a bad habit. Maybe I will go back and finish it, but I'm not sure. Now, I said Dead House Gates is the best book published in the year 2000, but A Storm of Swords was also published in the year 2000. Now, I know a lot of fans of both, and I still think it's up for debate which one's better. I'd have to read A Storm of Swords again. I got a recency bias towards Dead House Gates, and also I just really love Malazan. And I got a fun story about A Storm of Swords. So the first time I read it, I had like no money. I was checking books out from the library, and they didn't have A Storm of Swords, and I was so mad. And so I went to my favorite used bookstore because it was there 20 years ago when I was looking for a copy of A Storm of Swords, and they had an arc of A Storm of Swords. And it was in this weird nook where they only had arcs, which they don't even have that section anymore. It's like video games or something. I wish they'd bring that back. That'd be cool. But I got an arc of A Storm of Swords. I read it, loved it, of course. And then I ended up selling it back and picking up a first edition, first printing. And that sat on my shelf forever. I loved it. And then I just kind of was burnt out on the series. Like, I know that this is something everyone's heard a million times, but I spent like 4 years of reading his blog where he just kept gaslighting everyone about when the next book was going to come out. And then the TV show came out and the series like blew up and I was like, I'm done. I went like full hipster and was like, it's not cool anymore. I'm out. So I ended up selling the book and I realized before I sold it that the spine was broken in this first edition, first printing. Well, when I went to sell it, I showed them. I was like, it's broken. And they're just like, they give me like $140 for it. This was at like peak TV show hype. So I don't know. They probably sold it to some dummy who didn't check to see if it was broken, or maybe they fixed it. I have no idea. That's not my problem. I showed them it was broke. They gave me money for it anyways, and I moved on. Yeah, I love A Storm of Swords. I need to read that series again. It's been a very long time. Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, written by an author who has never been controversial and is beloved by all. That is a joke. Please don't yell at me in the comments. I'm looking at this book cover that I pulled and it doesn't have J.K. Rowling's name on it. That has to have been intentional. Someone had to have done that. I just Google them and, pull a picture. That's weird. So Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire was the first one that I had to wait for. I got them in the year 2000 for my birthday and I started reading the first 3. Fortunately, I only had to wait like a month for the next book in the series. And I remember just absolutely loving it. It was such a great adventure. I mean, it's Harry Potter. I read them again in my early 20s and still had a lot of fun. Then J.K. Rowling decided to act like a lunatic on the internet. So what are you going to do other than, I don't know, read other stuff? I used to love Malcolm Gladwell and the book The Tipping Point. And then I started listening to a podcast called If Books Could Kill. And what they do is they take nonfiction books from the last like 50 years that have ruined the world, essentially. They'll take a book and it'll be something like Rich Dad, Poor Dad, some stupid thing like that. And they'll talk about the author and they'll talk about the book and they'll break down like why it is wrong or what it got wrong or why the author sucks. And they got to Malcolm Gladwell and I'm like, what are they going to do with Malcolm Gladwell? And it's like, oh, it's all pop science that just makes you feel good when you read it, but doesn't really work in the real world. It really frustrated me. And then they're like, these are examples of like all the different things that were wrong. You know, a bunch of the stuff that Malcolm Gladwell has talked about in there has been debunked, or it's like, yeah, there's like some evidence, but not enough to be conclusive. And then some of the stuff, I don't remember if it was in Tipping Point or not, but the whole 10,000 hours crap where it's like, you won't be a master unless you spent 10,000 hours doing something. And it's like, well, I mean, I can spend 10,000 hours kicking a wall. It doesn't make me a master of kicking the wall. What makes you better is intentional practice. Also, specialization is for insects. Range by David Epstein, like completely debunked the whole 10,000 hours thing to the point that even Malcolm Gladwell is like, yeah, that was wrong, which I'm glad you owned up to it being wrong. But also it's like, bro, take a step back and look at your books and what you're putting in there. And are you in a hurry? And are you using the best information? So when it comes to The Tipping Point, maybe if I go back and read it, it'd be interesting. But I think I would be more interested in a book that goes back over all that stuff to see how wrong it was. That would be fun. Or, you know, just a podcast like If Books Could Kill. Okay, I said Faith of the Fallen was the worst book on this list. But I also read The Bear and the Dragon by Tom Clancy. As a 13-year-old, I hadn't read any of the other Jack Ryan novels. My buddy was just like, this book's pretty good. You should check it out. And I was like, all right, this book's not good. At the time, I didn't know what I was getting into, and I'm reading it, and I'm like, what are these weird racist jokes that are in here? One of them is about Japan and STDs or something. And then, of course, there's like the generic Polish joke. And I'm like, what is happening? How is this book any good? I'm like, where's the action? I got all the way through it and there's barely any action in it. It was supposed to be about a war between China and Russia, and it ends up being like a big nothing. And I was so frustrated as a 13-year-old. I'm like, this is supposed to be about war. Well, that is the end. There's a lot of interesting books that came out in the year 2000, stuff I haven't read, and I would like to talk about two of them because they are on my short list of things I would like to read. First up, we have The Amazing Adventures of Cavalier and Clay by Michael Chabon. I love his writing. The only thing I've read from him is Gentlemen of the Road, but it is fantastic, and this thing won a Pulitzer Prize. I really want to give it a try. I've read a few Pulitzer Prize winners. I have a favorite. It's A Confederacy of Dunces. Yes, I brought that up in a video about books from the year 2000, and you know, it was written in the 60s and published in 1980. I really want to give more Michael Chabon a try. I really enjoy the salty reviews of Gentlemen of the Road, where they're basically crying about it not being something like The Amazing Adventures of Cavalier and Clay. So maybe I won't even like it. I guess I will find out as soon as I find a cool copy, or if I decide to do it on audio. I don't know yet. Let me know in the comments if The Amazing Adventures of Cavalier and Clay is good, and maybe I'll make it a priority for this year. The other thing I want to read is Perdido Street Station from China Miéville. I've never read any of his books. I really want to give them a try. A lot of people I know really enjoy them, and I am hoping that I will enjoy them too. It would be great to add another writer to the roster of banger makers. That's a good way to phrase it. So hopefully I can get into that and have a great time. Other than that, there were a lot of turds that came out in the year 2000. I looked at the New York Times bestsellers, and other than 1 month where Winter's Heart was on there, all the other months were weird. And then I dug a little deeper because I was like, wait, Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire came out that year, and I watched hundreds of copies sell by the time I grabbed my copy. So I went and looked. New York Times changed the rules so that Harry Potter couldn't be the New York Times bestseller. They changed it right before The Goblet of Fire came out and made a children's book category and put it in that. And I was like, that's kind of whack. So the first 3 books were probably on the bestsellers chart for who knows how long. So I guess at some point the New York Times was like, we can't have a kid's book dominate the New York Times bestsellers list all year because, you know, people want exposure, and that ain't going to happen if one book dominates the whole year. Let's quit digressing and move on, because that's it. That's everything I've read, everything I want to read from the year 2000. Thank you so much for sticking around and watching my channel. channel and helping me get to 2,000 subs. It means the world to me. I know I said thank you at the beginning, but I just wanted to reiterate it. Making these videos is a joy. Helping other people find books is why I am on booktube. And anytime I get a comment where someone's like, hey, you recommended this book, I really liked it, blah, 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 or hey, thanks for making this guide on this author, it's really helped me figure out what I want to read from them, it means the world to me. Let me know in the comments what you were reading in the year 2000, if you existed, because I'm getting old and it's kind of jarring when someone's like, I wasn't alive then. And I'm just like, oh, okay. Let me know what you've read from the year 2000 as well. I think that's it. Thanks for watching. And with that, I'll see you next time.